it's something that really, really concerns me is that right now in our culture, the way we talk about anxiety is that we tend to go down a purely psychological or psychiatric road, and that is life-saving for lots of people. So I'm not taking away from that at all. But what we've forgotten is that anxiety is a symptom of iron deficiency. I'm not saying that everyone who
really is actually. When I was pregnant with Geordie, my ferritin stores were at 2. I was like so anxious, palpitations, anxiety, felt like something was sitting on my chest. The minute a patient now says to me, oh, my chest, I'm like, that's iron.
There you go.
But it's an awful feeling.
So right now, I think there's this pattern where if a teenage girl says inside her home, oh, I feel really anxious, because of culturally how we're talking about it right now, it's straight to sort of that psychology road. And that might be the right road. But my worry is that something like iron deficiency can so easily be missed. And they're often at an age where they might be on social media and being influenced by people they admire who eat purely plant-based, for example. And they've just started to menstruate. And so right at a time where they actually need way more iron than ever before, they've dropped their iron by going purely plant-based. And anxiety can be a symptom that arises, and I want to shout that from the rooftops, and I want everyone to understand that so that we miss less of them. A study was published 2023 called The Psychiatric Manifestations of Iron Deficiency Anemia, and they talked about how not just anxiety but low mood, ahedonia, people's inability to feel pleasure was hugely linked to iron deficiency, and addressing it made all the difference to those symptoms. So it's just a really good watch out, I think. Know your iron levels if you have lots of anxious feelings, and correct it if you find it.
Actually, it's the one thing that is just tested and tested and tested. Like,
it is.
Every doctor is happy to test iron.
Yes.
Let them test it.
Yes.
And get those results. But then what happens is obviously people are then recommended iron in supplementation form. Is that the best thing for them to do at that point?
Again, sort of rounding back to your previous question, we've got to find out why they're deficient in the first place. So is it a lack of intake? So food first. Supplements are brilliant, but they're not a substitute for a great way of eating. You can't live on rubbish and then just supplement your way out of that. So, and I know that concurs hugely with your philosophy as well. So let's get everything we possibly can from food. If we're not getting enough from food, that's where supplementation can be game-changing, obviously. So it can be a lack of intake, or the person might be deficient because they're not absorbing it properly, and there are lots of reasons for that. It might be undiagnosed celiac disease, they might have Helicobacter pylori, parasite-type infection, or it could be obviously really significant blood loss, whether that's through menstruation, or it could be blood loss because they're training for something like an endurance type thing. So there can be microscopic bleeds from the bladder or the bowel, foot strike hemolysis. Finding out why someone's deficient, I think, is really key. And then obviously correcting that thing that's gone awry, I think is game-changing. But obviously supplementation can be really important, especially when needs are high.
It's the one thing that everybody does straight away, supplement, but probably not give any consideration to any of the other things that you're talking about. Because it's just not usually what's discussed in an appointment with a doctor that's doing the testing.
And the supplements that are often recommended are synthetic. They're made in a lab. They can be really constipating. That's a really common side effect of iron supplementation. So people will say to me, I'd rather be iron deficient than constipated, so they don't take the supplements.
Yeah.
There's some groundbreaking research been done looking at ferritin iron extracted from organic peas, and that's non-constipating, highly bioavailable. It's got its own absorption mechanism, so that's a good one to look out for if you're looking for a supplement that's not constipating, ferritin iron.
So what do people need to look at? Is the ferritin just as important as looking at their iron?
In the blood test?
Yeah, because often someone's ferritin might be low, but their iron levels are high.
That's where other nutrients come into consideration. So for great iron metabolism, we need copper, we need vitamin A, we need beta-carotene. So when we see that sort of picture in someone's blood work, sometimes it's because of them not having enough iron, but sometimes it's related to one of these other nutrients like copper or vitamin A. Sometimes they need all of those things. So ferritin obviously is iron storage, and the normal range in Australian pathology labs is for menstruating adult women is 20 to 220 micrograms per litre. And in my clinical experience, that bottom number is too low. When it's below 50, it's like you don't have a backup battery. So I encourage people to know what their ferritin is. I've had lots of women say over the years, my ferritin was 22, so I was told that was normal, and they're just They can hardly keep their eyes open. So we want that ferritin minimum 50. I encourage people to get it a bit higher, 80 or 100, so that they've got a really robust backup battery, particularly if they're going through perimenopause where they might be bleeding more frequently or having heavier periods, for example. But it's not just ferritin we want to look at. Transferrin is another parameter in iron studies, and a good way to think about it is it's like a sign of iron hunger. So the normal range for women, adult women in Australia is 2 to 3.6. And once it goes above about 2.5, 2.6, I see that as the body seeking more iron. So it can be confusing if you see transferrin with an H beside it and you think, oh, that's high. Yeah. So people think, oh, I've got too much of that type of iron, but it's not. Transferrin's like a taxi that drives iron around. And when we make more taxis, we need to pick up more passengers. Obviously, the passengers are iron. So, yeah, once that transferrin gets above about 2.6-ish, that's a good time to, and particularly if ferritin is below 50, that's your body saying some more iron would be really helpful for me right now.
And what about iron itself?
Yeah, so
in terms of levels, since we've mentioned the others.
Yeah, so that's usually a reflection of dietary intake and or supplementation. So that's your serum iron is how much iron is actually there and available in the blood. If transferrin is just normal and healthy and you've got high iron, low ferritin, it can be a copper problem. You're just not getting it into storage. We used to get some copper from our water because we all had copper pipes. Obviously, most of us have plastic pipes in our homes now, but there is copper in offal, it's in shellfish, it's in avocado, it's in dark chocolate, so we can get some copper from food. But if people have gut problems, they might not be absorbing it well, they might have an eating disorder, they might just not eat enough food, not because they have an eating disorder, they just don't focus on food, they're busy, they have coffee for lunch, for example. They're the type of people who might not be getting enough copper going in.
We've talked about anxiety, we've talked about tiredness or burnout. Maybe we didn't actually say that. What are the most common signs that somebody might be low in iron?
So fatigue, Nat, is the first marker.
I think everyone can probably associate with that. And if they've had a history of low iron, they know when it's low again. They're like, I feel that way again.
And I think too, and I have no doubt you see this in your work, people put up with fatigue. They don't see it as feedback. They write it off to, I'm busy, I'm stressed, I handle a lot. But it's feedback from your earth suit saying, I need you to do something differently here. And the way I encourage people to look at it is fatigue that's not resolved from a good quality sleep. If that persists, then that can be, it's worth investigating what's going on with your iron levels if that's the case. So fatigue definitely, and obviously that's because our red blood cells transport in the hemoglobin, transport iron, oxygen throughout the body, and iron is needed for that. And so that's why there's almost nothing in the body that's not affected by iron deficiency. And the red blood cells, this just blows my mind. And I say this because I think the more in tune we are with how miraculous our body is, the more likely we are to look after it, because I think we look after what we care about. Every second we make 2.5 million new red blood cells.
Amazing.
And iron is needed for all of those. Wow. Inside your body there's actually an iron pool, and what you eat contributes to that iron pool. But also red blood cells live for 120 days, and when they die, the iron inside them is still perfectly good. And so they donate that iron when they're dying, they donate it back to the iron pool so it can go wherever it needs to. And one of its jobs is to get back to the bone marrow to make those red blood cells.
What an amazing system we have. It knows what it's doing.
Doesn't it? We just sometimes have to get ourselves out of the way so it can do what it needs to do. But yeah, so fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, as we talked about, heart palpitations. You might crave ice.
That was me in the pregnancies, both of them. That's how I knew. I just chewed ice the entire time. It's all I wanted.
A new one I've heard is some women will freeze nuts and they want the cold, crunchy nuts out of the freezer. So rather than just, I'll grab a handful of nuts out of the cupboard, it has to be cold and crunchy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I did both pregnancies, but I didn't feel deficient with Liv, but I definitely, both pregnancies, that's all I did was I'd crush ice and I'd have it with sparkling water and some type of cordial or something because, you know, you're pregnant, so you do crazy things. It was also a while ago.
Love it.
Geordie's 14 nearly. That's the last pregnancy I had. It is interesting how your body serves up these little signs that we can be none the wiser about.